The headlines, the issues impacting you and your family. This week in Cincinnati on WCPO 9.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Cincinnati. Thank you for joining us on air and wherever you stream your favorite programs. I'm Tanya O'Rourke. One of the most hotly contested congressional races in the entire country is in Ohio's 1st District. That race pits incumbent Republican Steve Chabot against Kate Schroeder. We spoke with Schroeder last week. You can see that interview on our streaming apps. Today, we're talking with Congressman Chabot. Ohio's 1st Congressional District covers western Hamilton County, parts of northeast Hamilton County, and all of Warren County. I spoke with Congressman Chabot on Zoom. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us here on This Week in Cincinnati.
Sure. It's great to be with you, Tanya.
I want to start with a question I believe I asked you the last time you ran, which is, please tell us 3 bills or significant amendments that you have sponsored in your last term or 2 terms in office.
Yeah. Well, probably the most significant was I was the chairman the last 2 Congresses. I'm now the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. And America, we know, relative to COVID, has been under assault for some time now, and the economy was really ready to go down the tubes. And so we passed the CARES Act, and I worked with the Democrats in crafting the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and it saved small businesses across this country. Our particular congressional district, which is the greater Cincinnati area, did particularly well. There are 16 districts, congressional districts in Ohio. Our district received more money, almost $3 billion. More small businesses received loans, over 16,000. And most importantly, more jobs were saved. Almost 250,000 jobs in our area were saved than any other congressional district in Ohio. And as I say, there are 16 of those. So that was probably the most significant thing that we've done. And this isn't just the business, it's those people that work for that business, and it's their families that they support. So this was absolutely critical legislation, and I was one of the 2 people in the House that was most involved in crafting that. As I think most people in our area know, I'm pro-life, my opponent is not, and I introduced the ban on partial birth abortion, which went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and it outlawed a particularly late form of abortion, particularly gruesome, and as I say, went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was upheld there, and it's now the law of the land. And so we've saved, the estimates are 20 to 30,000 innocent unborn lives every year. We've got a long way to go, but I think that's certainly something worth noting. And then probably most importantly was my role in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is legislation that cut taxes across the board on virtually every American. About 85% of Americans had their taxes reduced because of that. In our community, in the greater Cincinnati area, it was over $2,000 lower taxes per family. And of course, that helped the economy to grow. It created more jobs. We had the lowest unemployment rates in recent memory among African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans. It literally was the lowest unemployment rates that we'd ever seen in this nation. Of course, then COVID hit, and that really changed the world to a considerable degree for all of us.
Congressman, I know you serve in the House. It is the Senate that will vote on it, but considering what happened at the end of President Obama's term with the Merrick Garland nomination, do you believe that it is appropriate for Republicans if they try to vote on a Supreme Court nominee in a lame duck presidential situation?
Well, I'm focused on what we can actually accomplish in the House. We've got enough on our plate in the House from, as I say, trying to get a second round of the PPP right now. That's what I'm working on this week. Last week, I introduced what's called a discharge petition, which would force Nancy Pelosi to actually bring up a vote in the House to let small businesses who didn't get a loan yet, or those who got a loan but may need another loan to stay in existence, not to have to go under in these challenging times, to give them the opportunity for another loan. This would force the Speaker to bring that up for a vote, and we hope this week. So that's what I'm focused on. Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown, my guess is they may well vote differently, but it's up to the Senate. And so I've decided it's best to stay focused on what I can actually do in the House rather than what the Senate may do.
Going to stay out of that one. I understand. So you have a lot of people and groups who support your campaigns. Obviously, among your donors are Walmart, Kraft, Heinz, Kroger, General Motors, all kinds of large companies, Procter & Gamble, Microsoft. Does that much corporate support affect how you approach various issues?
No, I look at every issue based upon how I think it will affect our nation, and most importantly, how I think it will affect the country and the people of my district particularly. And so we receive contributions, as all people do, people that are running for office. My opponent has an ad up where she says she doesn't take corporate PAC money. Well, it's not really truthful, because what happens is Nancy Pelosi gets huge amounts of corporate PAC money, as does a group called Act Blue, and then they fund people like my opponent. So it's really hypocritical for them to say that, because in reality, they are getting corporate money, even though they say they're not.
All right, so let's talk about 1998. You were running against Roxanne Qualls, I should say. You were criticized for not bringing enough federal dollars back to the district. You took the stance of a fiscal conservative, and you said you would not support wasteful or unnecessary federal programs. So what right now, especially in this light of all the COVID situation, do you define as wasteful and unnecessary?
Well, the perfect thing in the city of Cincinnati, in my district, in our community, is the streetcar. That was something that was very divisive. That they got federal money when one term I was not in office, and that's an example of a very wasteful program, which I said I wouldn't support and didn't. But there's a whole range of things that I have supported. I've supported the improvements on Interstate 75, 71. We're working on Western Hills Viaduct funding now. We've been working on Brent Spence Bridge funding. We got $53 million on that, but it's going to take a lot more. We were able to get something called projects of national and regional significance in the last transportation bill, and there's a pot of money to pay for a significant portion of the Western Hills Viaduct. In order to get that money, of course, the local folks, Ohio and Kentucky in particular, have to agree how they're going to pay for the local match part of the funding. That's what's fallen short so far, so we hope they can get their act together on that. We supported our hospitals, schools within our area, the Waldvogel Viaduct going over into Price Hill, the Fort Washington Way, the zoo, the University of Cincinnati, Children's Hospital. We've supported a whole range of helping our people back in our community.
I do want to stick with what you just talked about, the Western Hills Viaduct. I understand about the Brent Spence Bridge. You're saying, if I understand you correctly, you're saying you've done your share of it. Now we need Kentucky to kind of step up to the plate and make sure that they're covering their end of it.
On the Brent Spence Bridge, Ohio and Kentucky have to agree on how they're going to pay for the local portion of that. They now have access to the funds that we put. It's billions of dollars in the fund for projects of national and regional significance. The Western Hills Viaduct, we've worked with the city over the years. We've worked with the county and the engineering department. They're trying to get various grants. We support them with that. It's a little more challenging to get federal dollars with the Western Hills Viaduct because it's not a federal highway. The Brent Spence Bridge, has 71 and 75, so that's clearly a federal nexus there. It's a little tougher with the Western Hills Viaduct, but that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to work hard for and with the city and the county to try to get funding for that too.
Okay, so my conversation with Congressman Steve Chabot is going to continue in just a moment here on This Week in Cincinnati. Coming up, we're going to talk about the deficit. Stay with us. Congressman Steve Chabot, thank you so much for being with us here on This Week in Cincinnati. You are a fiscal conservative. In 1994, the federal debt was about $4.7 trillion. Today, it's at $23 trillion, and the Congressional Budget Office predicts next year the federal debt is going to be larger than the entire U.S. economy. So for years, politicians have said we will grow our way out of growing debt. That hasn't worked. We know there's a pandemic and that has ballooned the deficit, but how can you help fix this?
Well, I've introduced the balanced budget amendment in Congress. I voted for it every time we've had an opportunity. We ought to have the fiscal discipline in Congress to balance the budget, even without an amendment making us do that. But that would be a great step forward if we could actually get it passed. Now, it takes the House and the Senate, and then you have to have 3/4 of the state legislatures support as well, 2/3 in the House and the Senate. But since we don't have that, I think you really do have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And that's why I've consistently voted against what the top groups that follow these things consider wasteful spending. There's a group called Citizens Against Government Waste, for example, and I'm always in the very top amongst the 435 members of Congress. I've been the very top member for voting against wasteful spending, according to these outside bipartisan groups. But it's very disappointing that the budget has grown, the deficit has grown to such a degree as it has. My opponent, I hate to say that, she on the Board of Health, where she's the head of the Finance Committee, under her leadership, they went to a $2.7 million deficit, and healthcare workers said that that hurt the city's response to the pandemic. And so that's particularly unfortunate. So I don't think her record when it comes to balancing budget is anything to brag about.
All right, you talked about cutting wasteful spending. So let's just go through the numbers. 10% of the budget goes to pay for the debt. Entitlements such as Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, that takes about 50%. Defense, about 16%, which leaves about 24% for everything from veterans benefits to making sure that our food, water, air are all clean. So where is it that you would like to cut? And if there's nowhere to cut, does that mean that we have to raise taxes?
I'm not for raising taxes, period. I was called the city's anti-tax crusaders for many years, and I still believe that that's the last thing you want to do, and that's why I voted for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which the Democrats inaccurately said was just tax cuts for the rich. That's baloney. It was tax cuts for people across the country and across the board. Now, when it comes to actually making the cuts, you have to look at where the money is, and you've indicated entitlements is an area that you don't have to cut entitlements, but you have to make sure that there aren't wasteful things occurring and that there isn't government waste, bloatedness, which just happens when you have bureaucracies involved, as Washington is. For example, I'm not for cutting Social Security, absolutely not for cutting Social Security, but I am for legislation called the Social Security Preservation Act. What would that do? Well, right now, they go into this what's called the Social Security Trust Fund, and they spend that money for other things like highways, welfare, our national defense. And they can spend the money for anything they want to, and they have. That's one of the reasons there really isn't money there waiting for us when we retire. I think every dollar that's taken out of a person's paycheck that's supposed to go for Social Security should only go for Social Security and nothing else. It's called the Social Security Preservation Act. I've been pushing for that for years and will continue to do so.
All right, so Republicans do not like Obamacare or anything that resembles it at all. So it's gone to court to get rid of parts of it that Republicans feel are especially wrong. What is your detailed vision for fixing healthcare in America?
Yeah, well, I do believe that the American people deserved better than Obamacare. There were things in it that I would have voted for and that I agree with. For example, allowing young people up to age 26 to stay on their parents' health care. I think that's a good thing. Pre-existing conditions. That's absolutely essential that you guarantee that pre-existing conditions are going to be covered. Now, that was in the last campaign. That was one of the biggest distortions by the other side, the Democrats, attacking Republicans. Our plan, the plan that I voted for, we voted to repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with something better. That was the American Health Care Act, and it covered, you had to have pre-existing condition coverage in there. Now, some things I think we could do, we could, for example, allow what's called association health plans. That means like small businesses right now, they can't join together to negotiate with the insurance company because they'd be in violation of antitrust laws. This would allow small businesses to join together so that they'd have more clout in negotiating with the insurance companies to keep their rates down. Also, what we could do would be to allow insurance to be sold across state lines. Right now, again, in most states, you're not allowed to do that. If you could do that, there would be more competition. That would bring the rates down too. So those are a few things that we could do right now. But in order to pass anything, you need bipartisanship. You need Republicans and Democrats working together. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often in Washington. Although in my time here, I've been one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. I almost always, when I introduce a bill, I get a Democratic co-sponsor to work with me. That's why I get so many things passed. University of Virginia and Vanderbilt did a study on members of Congress and who were the most effective. And in the last 2 times they've done it, out of almost 200 Republicans, I came in as the number 6 and number 7 most effective member of Congress because I get so many things passed. And
Congressman, I got to take a break real quick. I'm sorry about that. We got to take a quick break. We're coming back with more of our conversation with Congressman Steve Chabot. Welcome back to This Week in Cincinnati and my conversation with Congressman Steve Chabot, running for a re-election in the Ohio 1st District. So, Congressman, the website 538 says you vote with President Trump 95% of the time. You are a reliable vote for the current administration in the White House. So, where have you voted against the president and why'd you do it?
Well, I tend to agree with what the president has done for the most part with policy. I obviously don't always agree with the way he puts things or tweets things out. And I've had some disagreements with him. Trade is one example. Although I have to say the president, for the most part, got it right. I tend to be a free trader. I tend to be somebody who thinks that the United States is so good and our economy is so strong that we can compete with anybody across the globe. The president tends to think that we ought to have more trade tariffs and things along those lines that aren't in my view, sometimes aren't particularly helpful. So I've disagreed with him on occasion, but I agree with his policies. For example, reducing taxes. That really worked. Reducing regulations. The president said that he wanted to get rid of 2 regulations for every new one that was passed. And we did even more than that. We got rid of a lot more regulations. So the red tape, the stuff that gums up the works for small businesses all across the country. And when you take the tax cuts and the reduction in the red tape together, that resulted in a booming economy. Of course, then COVID came along, and that's something that really hit us right in the gut. And the worst thing is so many lives were lost. And that's why we need to defeat that pandemic. That is absolutely critical, that we defeat COVID, that we get a vaccine as quickly as possible. I really agree, especially with the president on Operation Warp Speed, where we put every resource that we can into developing a vaccine as quickly as possible so that we can get this economy and get our schools open again, do it safely. We always have to have safety as the priority, but get the economy moving, get schools open so we can get people back to work again, get the country firing on all cylinders again. So I mostly agree with him. There are times when I've disagreed.
Quick question, yes or no answer. If the FDA approves a vaccine, will you get it?
Yes, absolutely. I don't want to put myself in front of somebody else, but I'll take it.
All right, Congressman Steve Chabot, we appreciate you spending time with us today on This Week in Cincinnati.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Great being with you.
That is This Week in Cincinnati for this week. You can also watch the latest edition of This Week in Cincinnati on your favorite streaming device. Let us know what you think about the stories you see on WCPO 9 News. Call our Feedback Friday hotline, 513-852-4998. Or visit WCPO.com/feedbackfriday, where you can submit a feedback video. Anchor Craig McKee shares your thoughts every Friday night at 6. Join us for breaking news, weather, and sports at 6 and 11 tonight on WCPO 9 News. Plus, we're always updating your headlines on WCPO.com.